history. Let's talk about them hills. Let's talk about the gold might be waiting for me there. Let's talk about the dogwoods and Appalachian hills. Let's talk about the gold might be waiting for me there.
Have everybody's attention, please. I'd like to introduce Miss Cassie to the podcast. Y'all gather around now.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Dane. So you are currently on the Wilmington City Council,
New Hanover County Commission.
and you're about to run for the North Carolina House of Reps.
I'm running for the North Carolina State House. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Cassie, great to be with you. Welcome back to Wilmington, North Carolina.
Thank you so much. So there's a lot going on in Wilmington lately.
Yeah, there is. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Some good, some bad. I try to, as best as I can, keep us steering toward the good, and hope we'll have an opportunity to talk all about that and maybe hear a little bit about some of your history here, because I know you've got some, right?
I do. Everybody always thinks that I'm just a hillbilly, and I'm like, I'm half beach bum. I was actually born in Wilmington. My family roots here go back to the very beginning of Wilmington when it was first settled, and so what goes on here matters to me.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess you've also lived a pretty extensive amount of time in Western North Carolina, as have I. I'm originally from Morganton, North Carolina, which is between Hickory and Asheville on Interstate 40. And I've pretty much been moving steadily east on Interstate 40 until I reached the termination point. I went to UNCG for undergraduate. I went to Chapel Hill for law school, lived in both of those places for a few years. And then my wife and I moved to Wilmington in 2012.
Wow. So how do you like the Port City?
Love the Port City. There's no place like it. I mean, we've got a lot of great places in North Carolina. I'm really glad, proud to be a North Carolinian, but this is a lucky place for me to have landed, and I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to help shape and make policy for the people who live here, because this is a place that's important and it's a place that needs to be protected.
I agree. And I also believe that we don't have enough native North Carolinians who are running for office anymore. And so I love that you're running and that you are from North Carolina.
Yeah, it's a special thing.
Yeah. Well, I have heard that you recently got put on the UNCW board.
Yep, the Board of Trustees earlier this year, 2025. Huge honor. This is one of our flagship institutions here in North Carolina. Obviously started off as a women's college back when, eventually became one of the universities in our university system, and we have got a tremendous amount of enrollment. We've now expanded the programs and educational opportunities that are available for people from all over. Obviously, you got to make sure that we're doing a good job of educating North Carolinians, but a lot of people from outside of North Carolina have heard about UNCW, and they're coming here too.
They are. And so I want to talk about that a little bit because there's been some major UNCW controversies here lately. And it kind of started with the Charlie Kirk Memorial that was painted on the Spirit Rock. I saw a lot of behavior that was not typical for the Wilmington that I know.
Yeah.
And of course that was upsetting. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder, there were obviously a lot of very charged emotions. And the folks who were at the UNCW College Republicans, they had gone to what we call the Spirit Rock. And the Spirit Rock is sort of like a free speech space where you can paint something that's important to you, and you can advertise an event that you have, you can do any number of things. And generally speaking, the rule had been that once somebody painted something on the rock, you were supposed to leave it for a period of 24 hours before you painted over it. You were supposed to, as a matter of courtesy, provide that to the person who had come before you. Even if you didn't like what they wrote, as a matter of courtesy, you should leave it up for 24 hours. Well, immediately after Republicans and Turning Point USA folks had painted a memorial to Charlie Kirk on the rock, there were some other individuals, some of whom may have been associated with the college, some who may not have been, who came and they wanted to immediately paint over it in violation of an unwritten policy. And what was really beautiful was that the folks who had in love painted that rock in memory of Charlie, they had encircled the rock and they had essentially said, we're going to stay here all night, we're going to protect this rock, we're going to non-violently make sure that the memorial that we put together stays in existence for the 24 hours that we are normally afforded a courtesy of. Well, unfortunately, some folks decided that they did not want to honor that unofficial policy and push through, and there was a bit of a scrum and a lot of ugly words that were said. And as a matter of courtesy alone, I found that to be highly improper. We have a policy on campus, even if it had previously been, it now is an official policy that you're supposed to leave the rock alone for 24 hours. Not honoring that, especially in such a charged time, I did not think was appropriate. And there were some videos that went pretty darn viral in connection with it. I know that a local journalist, Nick Craig, was one of the people that helped promote that video. It ended up getting national attention. And I don't know that it's always a good thing to get national attention. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it isn't. And this is one of those instances where I wasn't really pleased about the national attention that we were getting, because there were just a few people that were not acting properly that then made the university as a whole look bad in a way that I don't think is reflective of the university as a whole. The Board of Trustees obviously supports free speech. Obviously, we recognize that there are disparate and different opinions that are out there, but we should have followed the policy that we had in place, which was to allow that rock to stay painted for 24 hours.
Right. I saw that video and it just broke my heart because, I mean, I spent most of my life in Wilmington. Yeah. And, you know, when I was growing up, it wasn't such a politically charged time, and we all got along and we were all partying together, and I was going to the frat house when I was way too young, you know, but to see that, it was upsetting because it's like, that's not my hometown. And so it makes me so happy to hear that you guys have addressed it.
We have addressed it. We have recognized that perhaps what we had to do was have more formal and official rules on how to provide for good behavior. You would hope that you wouldn't have to do that. You would hope that the unofficial policy would have been enough, that would have been the thing that would have kept everybody in polite and nonviolent disagreement with one another. Because look, let's not pretend everybody has the same opinion. Everybody does not have the same opinion. And the university system is certainly a place where different opinions are supposed to be challenged, and you're going to argue, but you're supposed to do it in a way that reflects positively on the university, and you're supposed to do it in a way that ultimately is pro-social. It's not pro-social to be yelling at people, screaming for profanity, pushing people out of the way because you want to paint over a rock that they're supposed to have painted for a 24-hour period. So I think that it was a learning experiment and experience. You know, again, wish it wouldn't have happened, but it did, and we're trying to move on from it, and we're trying to learn from it, and that in part is how we have arrived at this new policy that says you've got to leave it for 24 hours. You've got to be respectful. Even if you don't like what's there, you got to leave it there for 24 hours.
I love it. So there were also some allegations of students who were supposedly harassing Marines that come down from Jacksonville to hang out here in Wilmington. I heard that that's not true.
It's not true, and it was also not true. We had a very scary moment where there were some allegations of a shooter being on campus. You know, you've been viral. You know what going viral looks like and means. It gets out of your control, right? And that's just the reality of our modern era, our modern technological connected era, that virility online can send things in any number of directions that you can't control. What happened in both of those instances were people saying things that weren't true, it getting repeated online, and then ultimately people believing that there was a threat, that there were people that were on campus that had rifles. And well, we had to send the sheriff, the police department, the UNCW police department onto campus, basically shut the area down, because we had to take that seriously, even though it turned out to be a hoax. We didn't know that at the time, and you don't want to pretend that something as serious as that isn't a hoax or is a hoax until you find out one way or the other. Well, we went around and there were people that were also reporting, hey, I'm seeing multiple guys with guns. Well, they were seeing the law enforcement officers that were on the ground who had, of course, firearms because they were looking for an alleged shooter. It turned out, Cassie, there was no alleged shooter. It was a video that had come from Virginia, and somebody maliciously inserted it into our community because they wanted to get people spun up. And one of the ugliest things that I saw were some of the local politicians, I'm not going to name anybody, who said, look what has happening from people who have lost their mind and tried to make some political argument, when in fact it was a video from somebody in Virginia, and as I understood it, it was actually a hunter who had left his shotgun in his truck, and it was a video from like a parking garage. And he wasn't a shooter, he was just a young kid who was a hunter, and completely got out of hand. And the same thing to be said about the Marine situation. These rumors and the rumor mill can be really dangerous. And I don't want to be one of those people that is a fuddy-duddy and says, watch and be careful what you say, but maybe give it a moment and let us kind of vet out what's happening. We do take safety and security of our visitors, our citizens, the students at UNCW very seriously, and we get on any of those allegations anytime they come, but let's not let the rumor mill run wild if we can help it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, but I automatically think when I hear it is I'm a little too redneck, because when you see somebody walking with a gun, I don't automatically think, oh, threat.
Yeah.
I think hunter. I think, and when I was growing up here in Wilmington, even at Laney, there were kids coming to school after going deer hunting, and there were guns in cars, and we all knew it.
Cassie, that was the reality of North Carolina life. The same thing happened in Burke County where I grew up.
Yeah.
You had a gun rack in the back of your truck, and you had a gun because you were probably going hunting before or after school. It happened all the time, and nobody thought twice about it. Of course, Columbine helped to unfortunately change that trajectory, but there are a lot of people that don't have any of that experience. They are automatically and very afraid of firearms of any sort, but firearms are a pretty darn important part of our country, our founding, and responsible gun ownership is something that I think a lot of North Carolinians take very seriously. And it's really too bad that we don't have the world that we did 25 years ago, but it has changed.
Yeah. I would like to turn back time, but
We got to march forward.
So you brought up enrollment
Yeah.
in UNCW.
Yeah.
And so I have noticed, everybody from Wilmington has noticed that I'm a unicorn. When
Right.
I come here and somebody says, where are you from? And I
Right.
say Wilmington, they're shocked.
Oh, yeah.
And the same thing is true for UNCW. There's a lot of out-of-state students who attend UNCW. And now I've heard that in-state tuition may increase for UNCW. What are you guys doing to ensure that in-state North Carolinians are actually getting an opportunity to go to the schools that our tax money is paying for?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, North Carolina schools need to predominantly prioritize North Carolina citizens and the students who come from our high schools. And the law more or less mandates that that be the case. There are certain ratios that we have to abide by that say you've got to have this number of in-state tuition, and you're only going to be able to allow a certain percentage of out-of-state enrollment. The reason that universities, including UNCW, want out-of-state enrollment is because they get more money from the out-of-state students, right? The tuition that they pay is a higher amount than the in-state. But you have got to your point, make sure that you're keeping our colleges and universities affordable for the people who live here, because to your point, exactly, our tax dollars are what ultimately have stood them up and kept them going over the years. Now, it is also true that universities rely on the income that they get from tuition. And with all of the various expenses and inflationary increases that are out there, there inevitably will be some amount of increase that will incur at some point. We have actually kept it stable and steady for quite a few number of years. There is an increase that's being contemplated that I think would be effective in 2027, but has not been voted on yet. We've actually got a meeting on that this Friday. I have not made any determinations because I try not to in my work make determinations until I hear the presentation and see the materials. But I know that they claim that there is a legitimate basis behind a modest increase on tuition for both in-state and out-of-state students. That we have not done one in quite a few number of years, and so there is at least a contemplated idea that we should consider this, but I have not made up my mind on what the proper vote is on that subject.
This next one kind of ties into the out-of-state students. I saw a post on X recently, and it was by Margot in Western North Carolina, and she was talking about how right now our state law allows out-of-state students to vote in local elections. And so they come here, they're here very briefly, and then they leave, and yet they can impact all of our lives by casting a vote while they're here.
We have got to tighten that up. I think the idea behind that law is that if you intend to stay, you can vote, right? And I guess that makes sense. Like if you're planning on becoming a North Carolina resident, we could conceivably understand this is appropriate for you to vote here. But if you can't really account for that, if you can't really audit that, you don't know what people are really doing. What I'm concerned about is that we've got people that are registered to vote in wherever they came from, not just out of state, in state as well. This is something that we have got to do a better job of auditing, and I think the current Board of Elections is actually trying to do this, where people are registered to vote back at home, even here in North Carolina, and then they're casting, say, absentee ballots or provisional ballots in the location where they go to school. We might be having some double dipping. I don't know for sure. I know that they're looking into that, but it is questionable, because if somebody does not intend to be in an area, if they don't intend to live in an area permanently, you do have to wonder whether or not this is a proper person to be voting and impacting and influencing our elections in that way, especially if they're also voting in wherever they came from. And I don't know that we have sufficient guards in place that it's actually checking that. So that's an area of concern for me, and I think it's something that we need to look into at the state level.
I agree with that. It kind of shocked me to realize that somebody can come down from Massachusetts and be here for 4 years. They are resident of a different state, and yet they can swing elections here in North Carolina. That just doesn't seem.
No, we've got to consider how fair that is to the people who live here, especially for those that don't intend to live here permanently. If you're just here sort of as a temporary citizen, a temporary resident, so that you can obtain an education, is that really the proper person to be voting in our local elections? I don't know. I can understand that somebody might say, well, I mean, I'm here for 4 years. That's a pretty significant amount of time, and you don't necessarily punish somebody that only comes and lives to North Carolina for 3 years for not school-related purposes. But I don't know, something about it doesn't stick right with me, and I think that we've got to, at a minimum, make sure that we don't have double voting occurring. If people are voting back in their home district, either in North Carolina or otherwise, as well as in their school district, that's a serious problem.
I would agree with that, which kind of brings me into illegal immigration.
Yeah,
big topic. There's a lot going on with illegal immigration right now. There have been allegations that illegal immigrants are voting in the state of North Carolina, that they're getting driver's licenses. Here in Wilmington, I believe there have been some local ICE protests. Yeah. It's kind of shocking to me that people are promoting other people breaking the law, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me to this question. So Wilmington had a proposed newcomer school that was supposed to open up. And my question would be, is that not our local government funding and supporting criminal activity?
Well, this was a major point of contention in this community, and it's something that I was very vocal about and ultimately changed the trajectory of what New Hanover County looks like and would have been. Long story short, there is a school here locally called the Mosley School that has traditionally existed to help children with developmental disabilities. And it is an important thing to do. We obviously need to make sure that those who have developmental delays or disabilities have appropriate and proper education. And that's what this school is doing. There was a proposal from a prior superintendent to bring in what is called in colloquial terms a newcomer school. And the reality is that a newcomer school is a migrant facility. It is a refugee facility. It is intended to help folks who are don't speak the language, may not be legal, to better integrate into the community. That's the idea behind it. And I absolutely, unreservedly said, New Hanover County is not a place where we should be facilitating things like that. I certainly am not saying that somebody not speaking English in and of itself is something that makes them not a citizen of New Hanover County. There are plenty of people who have gone through the proper process to become an immigrant in the United States, and English is a second language. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is us deliberately setting up a facility that was intended to bring people in from all over because New Hanover County had been identified as a place where this is where we're going to do it. And I said, no, we're not going to do it. First of all, New Hanover County is the second smallest county by geographic size in North Carolina. We cannot accommodate the whole world in New Hanover County. I'm not going to apologize for saying that. There's only so many people that we can ultimately fit inside of this county, and to put further strain on our education system, on our infrastructure system, with individuals in this facility that we're talking about, I found to be totally disagreeable. And so I advanced an argument publicly, and I got a fair bit of heat from some people in connection with it, and some in the media who did not like what I was saying because they said, well, you're not being fair, it's not really a refugee facility. But if you read a WUNC article about this, they have two of them in Greensboro. They started out with one, and it was so wildly successful that they ended up having a second one. Well, don't tell me that there isn't a deliberate intentionality in bringing in a larger number of people into a community from questionable places, may not have legal status in this country. If you're doing it elsewhere, it was so successful that you then opened up another one. And then you don't want me to believe that you had the same intentionality here in New Hanover County. Well, I just had to stand up and say no. And I had to, yes, take some slings and arrows of criticism from some who disagree with my position on that, but the overwhelming majority of the public agrees with you and I on this subject. They don't want New Hanover County to be that place. And I'm not going to apologize for protecting the people of this community.
I think that that's a great thing. And actually, I find it extremely insulting. They wanted to take a school that is intended for special needs kids to turn it into that. I was a volunteer for Special Olympics for many, many years. And when I heard that, I was like, why in the world are they taking something that is great for American kids who are in need and trying to transform it into something for children who aren't from here and probably aren't legally here?
There are any number of ways that you can spin it, but here's the simple reality. I said, I'm going to put the existing children of New Hanover County first. And whenever you start talking about taking local dollars away from, because that's inevitably what you're doing, you're taking it away from local existing children and students and then diverting it to populations that don't even live here yet, that have not integrated into the United States, that may not be legal. That is not a proper use of local money. It's not a proper use of state money. It's not a proper use of federal money. And you've got to have people that are willing to stand up and say no. And yes, you will be criticized. There will be people that say any number of ugly things. You're this, you're that. I have got to just keep myself clear-headed from getting bogged down on those things because I am human. It hurts my feelings whenever people call me ugly names. But I know my heart, and my heart is trying to protect the people of this community, try to make sure that they come first. And if you were to ask the average citizen in New Hanover County whether or not they want this to be a hub for refugee resettlement, they would tell you no. And that facility was intended to achieve just that. That's why we had to stop it.
Well, it doesn't matter what stance you take, somebody's going to be mad these days, right? I feel like I experienced that. I wasn't even talking about politics yet, and I was already being stalked and harassed and tormented.
Well, and I mean, just as a matter of pure numbers, there are 245,000 approximately people in New Hanover County. Like, clearly some large number of them, hundreds, actively dislike me for whatever reason, right? I don't have to necessarily do anything. It just may be the way that I look. You can't let that drive your decision making as a policymaker. You were elected to set good, proper policy and to not let the mob stop you from doing that. Easier said than done, but it's really critical. And this is actually what leadership, I mean, it turns on this. Good leaders stand up, do what must be done, even in the face of difficulty. Now, also good leaders are willing to look back and say, maybe I've been wrong about this. Maybe I need to reevaluate my position. But that's through polite proper dialogue. And yes, it's been paying attention to protest and all of those sort of things. People have the absolute right to protest, but we have got to recognize that some of what leadership necessitates or requires is people saying, I'm going to do what I believe is right, even though there will be some negative consequences that are associated with it.
Right. All right. So this one is a big deal for me. And I actually wrote on the blog an entire blog piece about this a couple of years ago. But the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge is getting ready to be torn down.
Huge
And
issue.
for me, it is just heartbreaking because I have been.
It's a quintessential image of Wilmington, New Hanover County,
Yes,
right?
it is. And I mean, you got to think, I've been traveling across the state since the day that I was born. That was how I knew I'm home to mama.
Yep.
Is this bridge, right? And whenever I got on the other side of this bridge, it was like, okay, I'm going home to the mountains. And so it's a big deal for me. It's a big deal for my kids. And now it's going to have to be replaced. I've kind of made my piece for that. But so I have some questions about it.
Please.
So when is construction actually going to begin?
We do not know. We have no idea. Unknown, uncertain. A little bit of background for your viewers. This bridge has been deemed functionally obsolete because it has been over 50 years. I think that it was, I hate to do this, but 58 or 59, I think, is whenever it was constructed. And it has a variety of different pieces, girding, a variety of things that aren't made anymore. So you have to special order them, you have to special make them. The last time that we had to do these repairs, we had to shut the bridge down for multiple months at a time, divert traffic all throughout the community. There's a huge impact, not just to New Hanover County, but even more so to Brunswick County, because Brunswick County sends more people over the bridge and back home again than New Hanover does. And in any event, there's been a dialogue for quite a long time, going back even to the early 2000s, that we needed a replacement bridge. And there was a contemplated idea that there would be a bridge that would basically be far more south, kind of come out on River Road. And that didn't end up going anywhere for a variety of political reasons, people pushing back on the notion from what is Brunswick Forest in Brunswick County, other political reasons here. But we've now reached a point where everybody who's at DOT says we have got to come up with a plan. We're not at risk of the bridge falling into the river at present, but it is coming, and we have got to figure out what the replacement is going to be. Now, we, until recently, had a sort of decent plan. There was a replacement that was contemplated that was going to go right beside the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge, so we could keep the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge running while the new bridge was being constructed. And that bridge was going to cost somewhere between $350 and $500 million, which is a lot of money, right? And we said, gosh, this is going to be really hard. How are we going to do it? Well, through advocacy, including by people like me, we were able to secure a $242 million grant from the federal government to help replace this bridge. So whenever we got that grant, we knew that we were darn close. We said, gosh, we are so close to getting this thing paid for. We'll get some money from DOT. I'm sure they'll help bridge the gap, pun intended, and we'll be off to the races. Well, then a revised estimate for the replacement of the bridge came in, and it is now somewhere between $1 billion and $1.2 billion. And so we are so far off on what the replacement costs are going to be and where we have available funds that we don't know what's going to happen. Now, the contemplated notion of a toll is something that DOT keeps talking about. I have publicly said on a repeated basis that I am not in favor of a toll. I would prefer for us to find money through other grants or some other alternate funding mechanism, but a toll is not my first or highest priority whenever it comes to this replacement. But the reality is that we have not secured those grants. Now, I have not given up. I'm working on them. I have been working on them steadily with federal partners, with state partners, and I'm still hopeful that we're going to make this happen. But it could stall out, Cassie. It could stall out, and we could just keep your bridge that you love for a very long time. But there will be a point where that will not be sustainable, and I don't know when that is. Part of my concern as a local leader is that I don't want to do what I think some leaders did 20 years ago, where they basically didn't want to deal with this issue and they kicked it down the road, and now we're dealing with it now. Well, I could do that also. I could say, well, I don't really want to deal with this. I find this stressful. I like the bridge, same as you, but there will come a point where somebody has to deal with this. So I'm trying to do my part at the local level with our state representatives, with our federal representatives, to try to locate those alternate funding dollars so that we can get this thing paid for. It's just shocking to me that we could go from, let's just call it 400 million to 1.2 billion. How is that even possible? But inflation has been nasty. Maybe they missed some things. I don't have a great answer for you on that, but I mean, a tripling of the cost to build that bridge, that's pretty incredible, and not in a good way.
Well, since NCORE, now anytime North Carolina proposes something where they're like, it's going to cost all this money, my first question is how much of that is bureaucracy and how much of it is red tape?
Right.
Because I know people who could go build something right now for probably a fifth or a sixth of what the state ends up spending on it, and that's ridiculous.
Well, I mean, that's one of the major problems with government and bureaucracy. I mean, you're not going to have me disagree with you on that subject at all. The private sector very frequently is able to move more nimbly and more cost effectively on items like this. But whenever it comes to major public infrastructure, generally speaking, the government has got to do it. I mean, I'm a fiscal conservative. I've fought really hard to keep taxes low in this community, to get bureaucracy out of government. But I also have to recognize and acknowledge public dollars build public infrastructure. So how do we get this done? I don't know. I mean, if you, for instance, wanted the private sector to build this bridge replacement, they'd do it. They'd be thrilled to do it. You know what they're going to do? Put a toll on the bridge. And those are sort of the options that you have. So we don't really have a lot of good options right now. I just keep holding out hope that I'm going to be able to convince some of our partners at the state and federal level to help us get the dollars that we need to get this thing built without a toll.
I hope so, because I feel like
I'm not giving up.
A lot of us who are actually from Wilmington, I'm going to be furious if there's a toll put in, because I know what happens. I mean, there's tolls all throughout Virginia. I have family there. We go visit sometimes. It's, hey, we're going to put in a toll until this is paid off, and then the toll never goes away. It's just another way to get an endless tax from the people, and I feel like that's not what Wilmingtonians want.
No, and it's something that, you know, really nobody wants across the state. I will say that the bypass around Monroe was highly politically contentious, may still be, but I use it all the time, and I know a lot of people like it. So there's something to be said for some of these projects, but it is a very different model, and we'll have to change the way that we ultimately raise dollars for infrastructure in order to avoid tolls in the future. We've got to, for instance, I think that some of the prioritization, and it's highly frustrating, but if you look at it, I do not feel like New Hanover County gets a proportionate share of infrastructure dollars. Whenever I look across the state, yes, I understand that larger populations are in Charlotte and Raleigh and in Greensboro and in Durham, but they get all the money. And I'm sure you've driven around those places. They've got endless construction of hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars worth of infrastructure. Well, a lot of people come to New Hanover County. A lot of those people who live in all of those places that we're talking about, they come to New Hanover County every year. And our infrastructure matters too. And so I'd like to figure out how we can tweak what it is that we're doing so that we can capture a better and higher proportion of those public dollars here in New Hanover County. We're too important, in my estimation, to be getting what we're currently getting. We need to be getting more. Now, I have to give credit to Senator Michael Lee, who has really been an excellent advocate for New Hanover County, and I think helped put us on the map a little bit more. We've obviously got some great State House reps and current State House Rep Ted Davis, as well as Charlie Miller here in New Hanover County. But those folks have helped us to get a little more than we were getting previously, and I'm very grateful for that, but I still think that there's more ground to cover. It's one of the things that I'll definitely be prioritizing should I win my House race next year.
So you brought up the toll up around Monroe. I'm so guilty of using that. I think that the reason that has been successful, though, is because there's not a ton of people on it. And so you get to avoid all the traffic. So it's like, okay, for me, I could go the other way, and sometimes I do. But on other times, it's like, okay, I have to be here for a speech at this time. I'm just going to take the toll. It makes more sense. And, so you still have both options, but when you're talking about the bridge, it's like, of course, there's always the other bridge.
And that's part of what the people who are advocates for the toll say. They say you can always use the Isabella Holmes Bridge, right? But that will probably create some major gridlock over there.
Right.
I use that bypass around Monroe all the time. I'm going to use it whenever I drive back to Morganton for Christmas with my family. But to your point, it is, I mean, you can zip along on that thing.
Exactly. I mean, it improves life that much. It really does. I don't think that the new bridge is going to improve life so much that people are going to be like, you know, I don't mind.
Please take me at my word. I am going to keep doing everything I can to avoid that. I'm working hard to find those funding sources, and I'm not giving up. And quite frankly, there is no timeline. I mean, the timeline is whatever we decide that it is, and we don't need to give up yet on how we can avoid the toll.
Right. All right, so I want to talk about the environment a little bit.
Yeah, please.
All right, so someone commented to me on X when I said that I was coming to speak to you, and they said that the Democrats in the city council or in the county, one or the other, that there is an anti-development bias. And I wanted to know if you knew exactly what they were talking about when they said that, because to me, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think I agree with that overdevelopment in New Hanover County is a major issue. It is something that literally makes my teeth itch.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, you could get across town in 20 minutes. Wilmington was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was the perfect little city by the sea. You're talking, there was housing developments, there was woods, there was wetlands, and those things are very, very quickly disappearing. And so I can understand, like, don't get me wrong, when something's falling apart, of course it should be torn down and something new put up in its place. Great, I want to keep Wilmington looking beautiful, but I also want to preserve our green spaces.
I could not agree with you more. This is one of the major things that I am focused on as county commissioner, and I have some wins that I can point to that will let you know that it's not just talk. This is in fact action that I have taken. So let me back up and say, whenever I first became county commissioner, I had a general sense. I'm a capitalist, right? And unapologetically so. My thought process was market conditions are as follows. If you have housing unaffordability, probably and maybe only the best way to fix it is to build more housing. Supply and demand, right? Well, as I got into the role, I realized that that's not really the case. First of all, you cannot build your way out of affordability or the housing crisis or whatever the case may be. You have to take into consideration that, again, this is a small county geographically, and furthermore, that part of the reason that people want to be here is because of the quality of life in this area. And so we have got to be, and we have become, more circumspect about what it is that we are approving and what it is that we are not approving. So it's not just that, though. It's not just a matter of making sure that we're saying no to projects that aren't good. It also means that the county has got to play a more deliberate role in the cultivation of green space. Even though I don't want the government getting into things more than it ought to, in terms of preserving property, really only the government is going to be able to, in perpetuity, create parks and green space that are going to inure to the benefit of everybody who's here now and will come in our community. So as a for instance, there was a proposition last year where a apartment complex was going to be constructed basically at Independence and Carolina Beach Road, between Carolina Beach Road and River Road. There's 61 acres that were over there. It was going to be 600 or 700 apartments. And I saw an opportunity. I said, you know, the county actually has a partial ownership in this property. Sort of an interesting story of a woman who left her property to the county. She wanted it to be a park. Well, her heirs sued the county because they said that she didn't have testamentary capacity, she wasn't in her right mind, to be able to leave the county the park. And we got into a prolonged lawsuit, and they wanted it to be sold so that it could be apartments, so that they could get the most amount of money. And after 20 years, this literally went on for 20 years, I said, wait a second, why don't we just make a fair offer to these folks? They want money, they don't care about apartments being here. I don't want apartments to be here. Why don't we make them a fair offer and buy out their interest and then commit publicly to keep this locked up as green space in perpetuity? So I came up with a concept that I called Airlie 2.0 because it made sense to people. We love Airlie. By the way, I don't know if you know this, Airlie could have been a bunch of apartments. It could have been a housing development. Thankfully, Representative Ted Davis and his family, who actually owned a large portion of it, all of it, decided to make a gift to the community in connection with that property. And now we have something that is beautiful and important, and it is impossible to imagine it not being there. But I envisioned in my head, I have 2 sons, 10 and 7. What am I leaving for them in the work that I have done and the work that I am doing? I want to be able to leave green space that belongs to them and all the other kids of this community forever and always. Well, the county did that. We succeeded. It was a huge success. Public obviously thought that it was a great idea. We're trying to replicate it in other places. But that won't happen by accident. Part of what local government has got to do, and actually we've got to do it with our partners at the state and federal level. I'm trying to, another one that I've been working on is the western bank of the Cape Fear River, right? You know, people have said, I want a casino to be there, I want a whatever to be there. Well, Cassie, rest assured, I do not want that. And what I'm trying to do is put together partnerships with nonprofits, with the federal government, with the state government, with the county government, so that we can acquire it voluntarily. First of all, I don't want to just take people's property. I want to offer them a fair amount of money and then lock it up so that we can keep it in the form that it's in right now, because I think that the current generations and the future generations are going to look back on those of us who had that foresight and say, thank you for doing that. Or they may not. They may not realize it, but they are going to look across and they're not going to see a big ugly building. They're going to see wildlife and trees, and it's going to help, for instance, with flooding concerns, which are real. We're actually on Monday coming up, we're going to be, looks like purchasing yet another couple of parcels that are along the western bank of the Cape Fear River.
So are we talking about Eagles Island right now?
Yeah, we are.
So my family actually used to own that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, how
yeah,
cool.
they really did. And so every time somebody talks about, you know, we need to build over here, I'm like, why are you talking about building on a wetland that has ties to the Gullah Geechee culture? And
I'm not in favor.
it's just, we have to protect some of our land. I mean, a lot of the flooding, to me, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but when you look at some of the flooding that Brunswick County has seen recently, and you see all of the wetlands that have been filled in, it really doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why.
It's not really debatable. I mean, there are impacts that are associated with building and developing. Now, you can mitigate against it with proper planning and whatever else, but there's a limitation on how much you can do and where you should do it. So this is part of what my focus has been on since I've been county commissioner, is trying to find these locations, including the one we're doing on Monday. We're doing 2 more parcels on Monday, sort of along 421 as well as the Cape Fear River. And we're going to lock those up, and we're going to keep them from being something else. And we've got more of those that are being contemplated. I think that there's another one that's along Greenville Loop Road that we're hoping we're going to be able to do. And one more point, though, that I want to make. I think it ties into our prior discussion topic. Some of the traffic piece is to be blamed on the failure for prior leaders to receive proper infrastructure funding. I think that some of the growth was inevitable. We weren't going to be able to stop it, right? But the traffic impact wouldn't have been so bad had we had folks that had the foresight to recognize, well, if we're going to do this development here, then we've got to make sure that we're planning for that we're putting in infrastructure that's going to allow traffic and people to keep on moving. Because the government does have an obligation to do that. If you're going to build things, you've got to make sure that you've got infrastructure, that you've got sufficient schooling to account for the people that are there. That's something that I'm committed to, and I'm trying my darndest to get us across the line on these as best as I can. But it is a challenge, for sure.
All right, so I'm bringing up something that just kills me. PFAS.
Oh my goodness.
So that's been going on for years. A lot of people don't realize it. I mean, we're talking early 80s. I was born. My mama was drinking PFAS when she was pregnant with me. This is something I've been ingesting my entire life. It was a pretty big consideration for me when I was making a list of pros and cons of whether we wanted to leave Wilmington and, you know, chase our dreams elsewhere. And so, I mean, my children were little. They were drinking PFAS in their water, you know, so I would love... It's enraging. What is going on with that? Because I've heard back and forth. I heard at one point they were going to be responsible for it. They were going to have to pay for it. And then it seems like there was some sort of backpedal. So where are we standing on that right now?
To those who don't know, this is basically a chemical compound that's in things like Teflon. and it has entered our water in the Cape Fear River, and it has come downstream, and it has spread out across our community, and it has impacted us in so many horrible ways. The number of people that I know who have died of cancer. We have a hot spot here. You can look at it. They have a whole map that will show you that there are places across the United States. We're one of them. And the enraging part is that they knew about it. Chemours knew about it. And they lied about it. They hid it from the public. And it basically didn't get discovered until 2016. As soon as we figured out, oh my goodness, this is going on, this chemical compound has been in our water and it is not good for us, we thankfully did act immediately to start taking preventative measures and corrective measures. And some of those ultimately culminated in an investment in a very large way, $50 million, into a filtration system that we have in the Cape Fear Public Utility Authority system. That is the water sewer system here in New Hanover County. And if you have CFPUA, you do not have PFAS in your water.
That's excellent.
That is an absolute stone cold fact. But there are a lot of people who are still on wells in this community. So one of my priorities has been trying to extend the water sewer infrastructure that we have throughout the community. But that is highly expensive, Cassie. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. And the reality is, why should local government pay for something that, strictly speaking, shouldn't be necessary? People should be able to use wells.
So it's not just the local government, it's really the taxpayer. I mean, when we lived here, our water was through the roof. I was shocked at how expensive water is here. And now I'm assuming that that's why.
Yeah, it's why. It's certainly been something that we've had to increase because of that filtration system, but we're trying to recoup that. So we are suing both New Hanover County as well as CFPUA. We are suing any number of companies, including 3M, Chemours, et cetera, because our argument is, you did this, you're responsible, you need to pay for it, not the ratepayers, not the taxpayers. I don't think that it's right that the people who didn't make any money on this proposition should be bearing this burden. But we went ahead, and rather than wait for the law to work it out, which, I'm a lawyer, sorry to tell you, but the law can take a long time to resolve something, right? We didn't want to wait on that. So we said, we'll go ahead and pay for it, but we want to get reimbursed. And that's why we're going after these folks, and we're going after them hard. Another thing that I'm quite proud of that I did while I've been county commissioner is that there was a proposition where those same folks, they have, and by the way, their profit centers are based out of the Netherlands. They're in Europe. They don't actually live, the people who make all of the money, they don't actually live amongst us little people and get exposed to the poison that they put into this community. But they wanted to basically send over byproduct waste of this material, ship into our ports, ship it up our roads so that it could be reprocessed in their plant in Fayetteville. And the local, or rather the state environmental folks were going to let them do it. The EPA was going to let them do it. Well, I wrote a letter with staff, and I got my fellow commissioners to sign off on it. And I said, Mr. Secretary, both at the state level and the federal level, you cannot allow this. This is wrong. You cannot allow these people to port this poison through our community. And all my commissioners signed off on it. We issued it. And then, what was amazing was that a whole bunch of other local governments started issuing letters. Governor Cooper also issued a letter. Hilariously, I like to tell this story. He backdated his letter to like the day before I issued my letter, even though he issued it like 10 days after my letter. But in any event, after like 10 days of advocacy, they ended up pulling the permit, and they did not let them bring it through. But those are the little things that aren't so little that local representatives can and should be doing if they're paying attention. So this is a big and important issue for me. Perhaps you can tell from my passion. But I'm fighting every step of the way that I can to protect the people of this community and to get back the money that we are owed from the people who poisoned us.
So you brought up this being a cancer hotspot, and it automatically brought up something awful for me.
Yeah.
And I had a cousin, and he lived in Monkey Junction for most of his life, and he developed a very rare type of lung cancer. and he was in high school when it happened. He ended up dying when he was in his young 20s. I was about 17, and we always wondered because his parents didn't smoke. He wasn't a smoker, and there was nothing that we knew of that he had been exposed to that could have possibly caused his cancer. And you said that, and immediately I thought.
And it's hard to tell. Look, cancer has a lot of places that it can come from. We don't really understand entirely why some people get cancer and some people don't. Obviously, we know there are genetic predispositions, environmental exposures. What we do know, though, is if you look at sort of a heat map of the United States, places where there are concentrations of this material, people have a higher incidence of cancer. So it stands to reason that it is at least driving some increase in cancer, some increase in deaths, and I find that intolerable.
Yeah, that is very intolerable. God, that just breaks my heart. All right, so let's move on before I cry.
Yeah, sorry.
I've heard that Fuquay Arena wants to do an interbasin transfer, and that this could potentially make the water prices in Wilmington go even higher. So can you tell me a little bit about what's going on with that?
Yeah, we're fighting them on it. They've got a proposal to basically take millions of our units of water and not replace it with anything. And long story short, they are trying to do it also in a way where they don't even have any public hearings anywhere close to us so that nobody can say anything about it. And we're downstream. The law actually says that the sort of furthest most downstream person has some priority in where their water goes and who's stopping their water from coming there. But it is, it's just unacceptable, and I don't know who in their right mind thought that that was something that they could just get away with, but the community is united on this subject. So we've got everybody sort of irrespective of what body of government that they're on, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat, who says this is totally unacceptable, we're going to fight you every step of the way on it. But I mean, the long and short of it is that they're trying to steal our water, and we're trying to stop them from doing it. I hope that we'll be successful.
Well, if you need me to cause a ruckus, you let me know.
Oh, absolutely.
And I will certainly help.
Let's ruckus it up.
Next thing, and this one is one of those things that, especially to those of us who have deep roots in Wilmington, we're impacted by this.
Yeah.
You know, there was the proposed shrimp trawling ban. Thankfully, that fell through. I know that there was at least a limit put on, I want to say, flounder not so long ago, and now people are talking about doing the same for blue crab. And when you talk about doing that, you're talking about disrupting coastal culture, and culture is my number one thing. Sure. And so I would like to hear, what your thoughts on it.
So as I understand the issue, there's sort of a conflict between recreational folks and commercial folks. And there's probably a decent argument to be made that we've got to make sure that we're not overfishing, that we're preserving the future for fishing opportunities of blue crab and otherwise. But I don't know that the science, at least as I understand it, bears out that the proposed limitation will really resolve some of what apparently are the environmental concerns that are out there. So this is the sort of thing that you've got to be really careful with, Cassie, because there's so many people's livelihoods that are on the line with something like this, and you cannot just come up with new bureaucratic red tape and hope that it's going to solve whatever your intended issue is. Look, I am a conservative. I believe in conserving things. I think that's actually something that conservatives do not get enough credit for, but a lot of us are environmentalists. A lot of us want to conserve. And so the impulse to try to protect our environment and wildlife and fish and all of that sort of stuff is a good one. But you have to be careful that there aren't unintended consequences that come from that, because there are second and third order effects that can really hurt people. And if it's not narrowly tailored to a sufficient degree, then you've created a problem. You've hurt someone's job. You've hurt the local economy. And so I think that we've got to be really careful with all of this stuff. Obviously, we've got some competing interests out there, and I'm sure everybody has a good argument to be made for why they think that they're right on it. But we have been going along pretty okay for a while, and I'd like to make sure that we keep our people employed.
Me too. I just, when I was a kid, when you would go out to Carolina Beach, there were the shrimp boats, there were the fishing boats, and now you go out there and there's hardly any left. And I'm like, man, if we don't stop or at least slow down on trying to ban these things, you're crushing, an occupation that has existed in North Carolina since North Carolina was first founded. And to me, it's very important to protect that. It's protecting our way of life.
Yeah, no, it is.
All right, so I'm going to go off in a completely different direction. Earlier, we were talking about guns, and I love guns. I love guns. And I am a huge proponent of constitutional carry, and I have a very good reason for that. It's because I have PTSD. That's something that is on my medical record. It's something that I have spent a lot of time dealing with. And I always get irritated when people say that, mental health makes you violent. Well, I've been suffering with mental health since I was 18 years old, and I've never been violent. Don't get me wrong, I've been in fights. That's more of a redneck thing than a violent thing. But it irritates me because I know it's automatically going to be harder for me to get constitutional carry, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. I'm a female. I'm someone who's in the public eye. I'm someone who's been threatened and harassed. And so it's kind of important for me to be able to constitutional carry, and knowing that there could be a barrier there for me is absolutely ridiculous. And so I'm just curious, you said that you support, Second Amendment. Like, where do you stand on constitutional carry in the state of North Carolina, and why do you think it hasn't already passed?
Well, there's just disagreement in the House over whether or not constitutional carry should pass. And all that I can tell you is that if I am given the opportunity to serve in the House, it would be my vote to vote in favor of constitutional carry. I believe in the Second Amendment. And I do believe, of course, that there are people that have to be appropriately identified as being dangerous to themselves and others. I think back on what just happened in Southport. Do you remember that horrible story?
My husband was actually in Southport. Him and his friends were down on a golf trip, and the guy was heading directly for them when he left from that shooting.
So it's a sticky wicket because the Second Amendment says that people are entitled to protect themselves with firearms. It is not saying something different than that, even though people try to spin it as much. But there are individuals like this man who is apparently very sick, who you really wish we could have caught and recognized that he should not have had firearms. And apparently he was reported, and apparently there was no real action taken. I don't want to weigh in too much on that. I don't represent that county. I don't represent that municipality. But I am concerned about those moments. So I do think that there are concerns that we have to keep at the forefront of our mind, but at the same time, the Constitution says, the Second Amendment says, that we are entitled to have firearms. And I think that the intentionality behind the carry provisions that you're talking about are in line with the Constitution, and it would be my intention to follow the Constitution in my vote.
I agree with you. I think a lot of people think that, the Bill of Rights is something that our government bestows upon us. No, I don't believe that at all. I believe that those are my God-given rights. I believe that I have the right to protect myself at all times. And so I get a little frustrated, especially with conservatives who are kind of stepping away from constitutional carry, because it's like, hey, you're looking to please people like me, you know what I mean? Not turn us off. And so,
well, my thought process is that I have to do that because it's the principled thing to do.
right.
It's not whether or not you like it or whether or not somebody doesn't like it. As I understand the legislation, it is in line with the Second Amendment. It is something that principally I should be in favor of. So those are some of the hard things that are out there. I know that there are plenty of arguments that people can make about this, that, and the other, but that's where I would land on that one.
I agree with you. Awesome. All right. So I wanted to bring this up earlier, and then we ended up talking about a bunch of different things, but there have been allegations made about a cash for vote scheme here in Wilmington. Can you tell me anything about that? And can you tell me what's being done to ensure that it doesn't happen again?
So it apparently did happen to at least one person. And I've seen a post by the individual who claimed that it was him. He said, I did in fact receive these text messages. He does not know who it came from. We have not, let me back up and say, it has been reported to local authorities and then turned over to the Board of Elections at the state level for them to perform an investigation. I believe that investigation is ongoing. I have not heard reports of there being a widespread issue to this effect. It's not to say that there hasn't been or there wasn't, but what was reported was essentially a single person receiving text messages saying, I will pay you to vote a certain way. And that is being investigated. I would sure hope that whoever did it will be found and will be held responsible. Whether they meant it on purpose or if it was a hoax, I have no idea. But you can't go around doing things like that. There should be a consequence. And furthermore, if it was a widespread issue, we need to uncover that. But I think on balance, from what I've been able to tell, New Hanover County's Board of Election this cycle did a pretty darn good job of processing votes, getting results out in record time. Last year, whenever I was elected county commissioner, they went all the way until like 2 a.m., and then the next day announced, oh, by the way, there were like 4,000 votes that we didn't count. And so I had like a month after that where I had to wait for them to process this vote, that vote. Was very concerned, actually hired legal counsel, filed an election protest because I thought that was totally improper. It was illegal. It was, I mean, this is without question, it was an illegal action by the prior Board of Elections director. And thankfully, we did not have that this year. So I have to give them credit for doing their work in a good and responsible way as best as I can tell. If there were some bad actors that were out there trying to buy votes, I hope the investigation will bring them to justice.
Me too. Wow. So I was kind of under the impression that it was kind of alleged. So to find out that that is actually what happened, that's kind of shocking. So, and then the next one, I'm not sure about the validity of this either. I've heard that the Wilmington PD is severely understaffed right now. They are.
The Wilmington Police Department has a lot of missing unfilled positions. I don't know exactly what the number is. I don't serve on city council, although I do try to keep track of something like that. I think it's close to 70 or 80 people that are not in positions that they're supposed to be in. There are a lot of explanations for that. I'm not sure which all are the most valid, but I do know that we have suffered in some ways from that lack of support in our police department. Thankfully, our sheriff's department, which the county is more directly involved in, is doing quite well from a hiring perspective. We've got people out in the field, and obviously we try to help the city of Wilmington and Wrightsville Beach and Carolina Beach to the extent that they need us. We're all over the county as the sheriff's department. So I don't want people to be too concerned, but the city is lagging in having the number of people that it's supposed to have in its police department. They have a new police chief. I'm hopeful that he's going to be able to right the ship.
Is it impacting crime stats? Like, has crime gone up as a result, or are things staying pretty the same?
They're fairly stable. I mean, we've seen certainly some increases in some lower level crimes, but also we've seen quite a bit of issues related to petty theft and larceny, and I mean, that's really problematic. Partially also you're seeing some delayed response times. Our 911 department fields all the calls for all of the local law enforcement and then farms it over to whatever municipality it is. And I have heard lots of reports of people in the city of Wilmington making a 911 call and then not seeing a police officer for 3 hours. And that's unacceptable. So there are little things like that that are greatly concerning to me, but I'm trying to give this new guy the benefit of the doubt, and I hope that he's going to be able to turn things around.
Me too, because that's terrifying.
Yeah.
3 hours, constitutional carry, just saying.
Right. In your own home, you have the absolute right to protect yourself.
That's right. We are a stand your ground state, which I absolutely love. But I want to talk about some things that people brought up on X. I'm not the most political person in the world. I have opinions. So a lot of these things I know nothing about. So I'm going to have to take whatever you say as
I'll
truth.
tell you the truth.
All right. So there are allegations that the GOP is funding Mayor Safo's campaign.
I think I know what you're talking about. I read an article that made some allegations along this line and listed a number of people who were donors who gave to Safo that are registered Republicans. So I think that's the better way to sort of describe the issue. The GOP, like GOP proper, the leadership of the Republican Party here in Hanover County did not support Mayor Bill Saffo's campaign. There were absolutely people who are registered Republicans who donated to him, and those people also donate to Democrats. Some people, despite their voter registration, aren't particularly aligned one way or the other. Maybe their business interest is, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I want to make sure that I support people that believe in the things that I support in. But I have to say that, at least in response to what I think is the article that you're talking about, I know those people, some of them anyway, and they're not in the GOP. They're registered Republicans, but they're not like part of the apparatus of the party. And so it's, I think, just a little bit of a distinction that's important to draw, that, I mean, there are Republicans that supported Mayor Bill Saffo, and I don't know if anyone should be entirely surprised, honestly, that they did, because the guy's been in office for 20 years and they call him mayor for life. And so for some people, it's probably just a matter of getting on board with the guy that they suspect is going to be elected. And I'm not excusing them, I'm not defending them. Everybody's allowed to do what they want to do with that stuff. But I'm pretty involved with the Republican Party, and the Republican Party did not make an effort to support Billy Saffo in the mayoral election. They fully supported Billy Craig in the mayoral race, and unfortunately he didn't get enough votes. So it is what it is, but I guess hopefully that's an answer to your question.
Gotcha. And thank you for that, because a lot of times I get accused of being, I'm GOP this, GOP that, and I'm like, no, I'm a registered Republican, and technically I'm not a true Republican. I'm a constitutional conservative. I'm a little more hardcore on my freedoms and things like that than some Republicans are. And a lot of people just don't understand the nuance there. I mean, there are some things that I'm pretty liberal on, especially when it comes to...
Everybody's got a mix of opinions.
Yeah, especially when it comes to medical marijuana. Once again, I have PTSD. I mean, SSRIs scare me. And for anybody who's been on them and had a terrible experience, they probably understand why I feel that way about it. And so, yeah.
I can't speak for why random Republicans would send money to Billy Saffo, but as far as there being some conspiracy that the local party was working to empower him and elect him, I've never seen any evidence of that. I mean, I certainly, in the rooms that I am in and with the crowds that I travel with, people wanted Billy Craig to win, and he just didn't win. He ran a good campaign. He was also a brand new candidate. And whenever you've been in office for 20 years, gosh, you got a lot of name ID whenever something like that happens. So that's as best as I can answer that question. I hope it's a good answer to your question.
That's actually, like I said, that's a great answer, because I was confused. When you say that it was an individual or a Republican individual who did it, it makes more sense than the GOP, because I got that and I was like, that doesn't sound right to me. That doesn't sound like something that happened. Okay, and then my last question really is, Sheriff McMahon has switched to Republican.
Very happily.
And I'm curious how that is being received by conservatives here in Wilmington.
Well, I think it's actually being received well by everybody, not just conservatives. Look, Ed McMahon is a wonderful sheriff and a wonderful friend to me and many others for a long time, and he's an example of somebody that, despite being a Democrat, I supported him as sheriff because I just thought that he was a good guy, right? I mean, he was a good guy who was doing a great job as sheriff, and so I happily voted for Ed McMahon, right? And this is one of those things that, it's a personal decision from him, from what I understand. He felt like it was appropriate for him to be registered as a Republican rather than a Democrat. He made a personal decision. But he also said, and I believe him, he said, I've never let politics get in the way of me being sheriff. I've never let me being a Democrat or me being a Republican define how I sheriff. And if you know the man, because he's been our sheriff for a long time, and he's a good, honest, conservative, Christian person, independent of his party affiliation, you know that he cares very deeply about this community. And so this personal decision is one that obviously he thought was appropriate to make. I respect and am grateful that he did. I'm glad to have him in the grand old party. But if you look at the comments and the people that are talking, it's not just conservatives that are saying they're happy. Plenty of unaffiliateds, of which there are many in New Hanover County, by the way, are thrilled, and they said I'm voting for him because I know him. But also lots of people that I know that are registered Democrats have said, well, I'm going to be voting for Ed because he's a great sheriff and a great man. So there are some things that you can thankfully do as a person to transcend politics. Look, I try to do that every day. I mean, I really do. We have a two-party system, and you kind of have to be in one or the other. And I've been a Republican my entire life, so I'm not in any way ashamed of it. I'm a proud Republican. But at the same time, it's not like the sole and defining feature of my life. I'm Dane Scalise. I'm a Christian. I'm a husband. I have 2 sons. I'm a lawyer. I have a small business that's a law firm. I mean, these are all factors that make me who I am. I try to be fair and kind to everyone. And you know, for my state house race, I mean, what do I want to do? I want to run an issues-positive campaign. I want to talk to people about what I am going to do, how I'm going to be able to help you. I don't want to be in the mud slinging trash at somebody else. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to do some of the same and rise above the nasty politics. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to get in it. And I'm willing to do it if I have to do it. But I'd rather not do it that way. I'd rather do it the nice way. And thankfully, to answer your question about the sheriff, he's done that pretty much his entire career. And I think that he will be successful in his next term as sheriff. I'm really glad to vote for him as a Republican in 2026.
That's awesome. Good for him. And I'm excited for you. I think you're going to do great. I think that you're going to win this. I pray that you win this just because you're so personable and you seem to love North Carolina so much.
I do love North Carolina very much, and I can tell you I did not anticipate. I think politicians say this all the time, and maybe they all mean it, but I really do mean it. I never thought I would be a politician. I literally just wanted to help my community, and I did volunteer work, and I did this, that, and the other, and then someone died, and then I got appointed to county commissioner, and then I got elected, and then a sitting House representative said, I'm not running next year, and you're going to run in my place. I mean, these things I sort of keep falling backwards into. I'm not quite sure, but what I do think that it is a reflection on, if you work hard, if you are positive, if you do everything that you can to help your community, good things have a tendency to come around. They don't always come around. But if you put yourself into trying to be the best that you can be and help others and be positive, it's crazy what can manifest. And so I'm really excited about this opportunity to run for State House. I think that it's going to be really cool to showcase what can be done at a higher and better level in Raleigh and here in New Hanover County. And that's part of what I'm really going to try to do over there. I mean, look, I'd like to change the world. I'm probably not going to change the world. I'll be pretty excited if what I can do is convince the folks in Raleigh that I'd like to see my friends and family in New Hanover County getting a larger share of infrastructure investment, education investment, making sure that our rights are protected, that our taxes are being kept low. If I can do just a couple of those sort of things, I'm going to feel like I made a pretty big difference. And that's what the campaign is going to be about. And I pray that the people of District 20 give me the opportunity to make the case to them. And if they do allow me to make the case for them, I think they'll end up voting for me.
I think so too. I really do. I mean, I'm kind of blown away. I've spoken to more than my fair share of politicians over the last few months, which I think is just hilarious. It's
You probably didn't anticipate that you would be doing that either, right? Yeah.
Never, right? I mean, anybody who's been following me for long enough knows that I used to be the girl who was like, don't talk about politics in my comment
I've been
section.
following you for a long time. I know.
Yeah.
And you remember me telling you, by the way, via text message that I was going to fangirl a little bit on meeting with you, and I am definitely feeling that. It is super cool to be with you in person. I have been loving your account for a very long time. I appreciate all of the highlighting of our state that you do, the positivity that you bring, but also the bravery that you're showing here recently on some items that I know put you sort of in the mix in a way that maybe you didn't want to be, but thank God for you doing it, because it does showcase that North Carolinians are resilient and strong, and we fight for what's right. You and I both are doing that.
Exactly. Thank you again so much for doing this thing.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, ma'am. Good to be with you.
Talk about the history, let's talk about them hills. Let's talk about the gold might be waiting for me there. Let's talk about the dogwoods and Appalachian hills. Let's talk about